Riven Cole always thought his name was better suited to a brooding anti-hero in some trashy space opera novel, rather than a washed-up miner on the arse end of an asteroid colony. Unfortunately, life had a way of throwing cosmic jokes his way, and here he was, signing up for the most absurd job of his lackluster career, diplomat to a bunch of aliens who looked like something out of a nightmare doctor. Seuss book. As Riven stood in the dimly lit hangar of Jarma, waiting to greet the enigmatic visitors, he couldn't help but let out a sardonic chuckle. Diplomat, he muttered, half to himself, half to the universe that clearly had a twisted sense of humor. When did I fall asleep and wake up in a bad episode of Galactic Politics 101? The hangar, a gloomy vault of metal and dust, echoed with the clanking of mining equipment being hauled around like the world's most depressing symphony. Overhead, the low hum of the colony's life support systems served as a constant reminder of the fragile line between breathing and not. "Keep it together, Cole," he said, trying to infuse some self-confidence into his otherwise pitiful demeanor. "It's just a bunch of philosophical jellyfish with legs. How hard can it be?" The door to the alien shuttle opened with a hiss that would put any horror movie to shame, and out floated Quarren, the so-called philosopher of their species. The creature resembled a translucent blob with multiple appendages, like an octopus that had spent too much time contemplating its existence in zero-G. "Greetings, human Riven Cole," Quarren's voice resonated in Riven's mind, bypassing the need for spoken language. It was a voice that sounded like it could lull you into a coma or convince you to walk out an airlock. "We have come to discuss the essence of your kind's existence." Riven rolled his eyes. "Yeah, well, if you figure it out, let me know. I could use a good laugh." Quarren's appendages fluttered in what Riven assumed was alien amusement. Humans are known for their humor, though it often eludes our understanding. "Join the club," Riven grunted, motioning for the aliens to follow him deeper into the colony. "Let's get this existential crisis over with, shall we?" As they moved through the labyrinthine corridors of Jarma, Riven couldn't help but notice the strained expressions on the faces of his fellow miners. They looked at the aliens with a mix of curiosity and dread, like someone who'd just found a moldy sandwich in their lunchbox. "You ever feel like a lab rat, Quarren?" Riven asked, idly wondering if his sense of impending doom was warranted. "Our species has often pondered the notion of being part of a greater experiment," Quarren replied, his voice as enigmatic as ever. "Right, well, welcome to our cheese maze," Riven quipped as they entered the makeshift conference room. The place was as dull as a lecture on space dust, complete with flickering lights and a table that looked like it had been salvaged from a derelict freighter. The aliens settled into their seats, or whatever it was they did, and Riven took his place at the head of the table, feeling about as competent as a fish at a spacewalk convention. "So," Riven began, hoping to get this philosophical show on the road. "What's on the agenda today? The meaning of life, the universe, and everything? Or are we sticking to lighter topics like why human souls taste like chicken?" Quarren's appendages twitched. "We have observed that human existence appears driven by a need for purpose, yet the purpose itself remains elusive. Why do you seek meaning in the void?" "Oh, we're just masochists at heart," Riven replied with a smirk. "Give us a void, and we'll find a way to fill it with our own special brand of chaos." The philosophical jellyfish seemed to contemplate this, their appendages shifting in a way that reminded Riven of someone attempting to solve a particularly tricky crossword puzzle. "Your species has a propensity for conflict," Quarren noted, his tone as neutral as ever. "How does this relate to your pursuit of purpose?" Riven leaned back, crossing his arms. "We're just overachievers in the self-destruction department. Ever tried to make a spaceship engine out of bubblegum and despair?" The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a mining laser, yet Riven couldn't help but enjoy the absurdity of it all. Here they were, humans and aliens, debating the soul's essence like it was the latest episode of a cosmic soap opera. "In truth," Quarren continued, We seek to understand if your species possesses what one might call a soul. A soul, huh? Riven echoed, scratching his chin. Last I checked, we traded those in for a faster hyperdrive. He could feel the aliens' collective gaze as if they were attempting to peer into his very being. It was unsettling, like having an audit conducted by a spectral entity. Perhaps, Quarren mused, the soul is not a tangible entity but rather a reflection of one's actions and choices. Oh great, Riven said with a chuckle. I'm doomed. My choices usually involve what to drink after a long shift. The conversation continued, meandering through topics as disparate as the universe itself. Riven did his best to keep up with the philosophical gymnastics, all the while wondering if he could convince these aliens to lighten up with a pint of asteroid brew. As the discussion wound down, Quarren made a surprising revelation. We believe there is a hidden agenda to your existence, something that transcends the mundane struggles of life. Riven's interest peaked despite himself. A hidden agenda, huh? Sounds like the kind of plot twist that'd make a space opera writer's head spin. Quarren nodded, or whatever passed for nodding. Indeed. We suspect there is a force within your kind that may yet alter the course of this galaxy. Riven couldn't help but laugh out loud. Well, if we do, I hope it's in a good way. Last thing we need is to be known as the species that made the universe a worse place. The aliens began to prepare for their departure, leaving Riven with more questions than answers. But then, wasn't that the human way? Always searching, never quite finding, yet somehow muddling through. As Quarren and his entourage returned to their shuttle, Riven called after them. Hey, if you ever figure out what our hidden agenda is, drop me a message. Could save me a lifetime of therapy. Quarren's parting words echoed in his mind. Perhaps, Riven Cole, you will be the one to uncover that secret. The shuttle doors closed with a finality that left Riven alone with his thoughts, and a hangar echoing with the silence of speculation. He stood there for a moment, contemplating the absurdity of life, the universe, and everything in between. But mostly, he thought about how much he needed a drink. With the kind of resignation only a minor-turned diplomat could muster, Riven turned on his heel and headed for the colonist bar. After all, if he was going to ponder the essence of humanity, he might as well do it with a stiff drink in hand. Riven Cole sat at the bar nursing his third, or was it fourth, glass of something that probably qualified as paint thinner on a more civilized colony. The dim glow of the neon sign flickered above him, spelling bar in a font that had seen better days. He could feel the colonist's pulse even in this dingy watering hole. Life support systems hummed, machinery clanked, and the hole-in-the-wall buzz of miners filled the air like a symphony of barely contained chaos. The bartender, a grizzled human with more scars than a gladiator, looked at Riven with a mixture of pity and bemusement. So, Cole, the bartender grunted, wiping a glass with a rag that was doing more harm than good, how's the diplomatic gig treating you? Like a bad joke I can't stop hearing, Riven replied, raising his glass in a mock toast. The bartender snorted, a sound that could have been mistaken for a laugh if one was feeling generous. What do those alien jellyfish want with us anyway? Not like we have anything worth taking unless they are in the market for existential dread and overpriced oxygen. Riven chuckled. They are philosophers, apparently, here to debate the meaning of life and other cosmic quandaries. Philosophers? The bartender raised an eyebrow. Sounds like a fancy word for a waste of time. Yeah, well, they're not exactly here for the free drinks, Riven said, swirling the liquid in his glass. More like they're trying to figure out if we're worth the trouble of not exterminating. Comforting, the bartender said dryly, moving on to another customer. As Riven pondered the grim realities of interstellar diplomacy, the colony's loudspeaker crackled to life. Attention all personnel, a voice announced, tinged with static and authority. This is Faye Irons. All miners are to report to the main hall for a briefing. Repeat, all miners to the main hall. Faye Irons, the pragmatic leader of the miners and someone who could cut steel with a glance, If anyone could whip this ragtag group into shape, it was her. Riven downed his drink, slamming the glass on the bar with a clink. "Duty calls," he muttered to the bartender, who nodded in knowing silence. The main hall was packed with bodies, the air thick with tension and the smell of sweat. Faye stood at the front, her presence commanding and unyielding. Her eyes swept over the assembly, taking in the miners' weary faces and the undercurrent of unease that simmered just beneath the surface. "Listen up." Faye's voice cut through the murmur like a mining laser through rock. "We've got aliens poking around, and I don't need to tell you what that means. Free therapy," someone quipped from the back, earning a few nervous chuckles. "If by therapy you mean the kind that leaves us floating in space," Faye shot back, "then yeah, sure." Riven found a spot at the edge of the crowd, leaning against the wall with a practiced nonchalance. He observed Faye as she laid out the situation with the stark reality that only someone who'd seen it all could muster. "These aliens, they're philosophers or something," Faye continued, echoing Riven's earlier explanation. "But that doesn't mean they're harmless. They're asking questions, probing for weaknesses." A ripple of concern passed through the crowd. Miners murmured to one another, their voices low and filled with apprehension. They were used to dealing with the hard truths of life and death in space, but this was a new kind of threat, one that couldn't be blown up or drilled through. Faye eyed Riven, jerking her head for him to join her. "Cole," she called out, her tone leaving no room for refusal. Riven pushed through the crowd, ignoring the speculative glances and hushed whispers. He joined Faye at the front, crossing his arms and doing his best to look like he had half a clue about what was happening. "Tell him what you told me," Faye ordered. Riven cleared his throat, feeling the weight of the colony's expectations pressing down on him. "Right, so these aliens, they're here to understand us. But they're not just curious in the friendly, let's have a tea party way. They want to know if we're a threat or an asset. And what do we do if they decide we're neither?" a miner asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. "Then we make sure we're not around for their next existential crisis," Faye answered bluntly. "We prepare like we always do, plan for the worst, hope for the best." Riven nodded, feeling Faye's words resonate with the grim reality he'd been trying to ignore. "Look, they're not here to start a war, at least not yet, but we can't afford to sit on our hands. We need to be ready for whatever they throw our way." "Easy for you to say," another miner grumbled. "You're not the one who has to keep the air breathable." Riven opened his mouth to retort but found himself at a loss for words. He understood their frustration, their fear. They were miners, not soldiers. They'd signed up to dig rocks, not engage in cosmic debates with alien philosophers. Faye clapped a hand on Riven's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that spoke volumes. "We're all in this together," she said, her voice carrying the weight of promise. "We stand as one, no matter what." The meeting dispersed with a sense of grim determination, miners heading off to prepare in whatever ways they could. Riven lingered, feeling the enormity of the situation settle over him like a leaden cloak. "You're doing good, Cole," Faye said quietly, her eyes fixed on his. He barked a laugh devoid of humor. "Good, I'm just trying not to screw it up." Faye smirked, a rare expression on her stoic face. "Welcome to leadership." As Riven wandered back towards his quarters, he pondered the precarious future that lay ahead. The alien's arrival had stirred something in him, a feeling he couldn't quite place. Was it hope, fear, or just another layer of existential dread to add to his collection? His thoughts were interrupted by the familiar telepathic voice of Quarren, echoing in his mind like a whisper through the void. "Human Riven Cole, might we continue our discussion?" Riven sighed, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on him yet again. "Sure, why not? Got nothing better to do than question my own existence." He made his way to the designated meeting room, a space that felt both intimate and oppressive. Quarren was already there, his gelatinous form shifting subtly with what Riven assumed was anticipation. "Your species is most intriguing," Quarren began, his telepathic voice as soothing as a lullaby. "We are fascinated by your capacity for resilience." "We're like cockroaches," Riven replied with a dry smile. "Hard to kill, even harder to understand." Quarren's appendages fluttered, a gesture Riven had come to associate with amusement. Indeed, we have much to learn from you, Riven Cole. Riven shrugged, trying to project an air of indifference. Just don't dissect me for science, okay? I've got plans this weekend. Quarren's response was as enigmatic as always, a blend of curiosity and a hint of something else, something that made Riven's skin crawl. We do not intend harm, merely understanding. Understanding, huh? Riven echoed, feeling the weight of the word settle over him like a shroud. Well, good luck with that. We've been trying to figure ourselves out for centuries, and look where that's gotten us. The conversation drifted, touching on themes of existence and purpose, the kind of topics that would put a philosopher to sleep. Yet, there was an underlying tension, a sense that something more sinister lurked beneath the surface. Tell me, Quarren, Riven ventured, feeling a reckless urge to push the boundaries. What happens if you don't like what you find? If we don't meet your expectations? Quarren's appendages stilled, the silence stretching between them like a chasm. That is a question we hope we shall not have to answer. Well, that's reassuring, Riven muttered, feeling the weight of the unknown settle into his bones. As the meeting wrapped up, Riven couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of something monumental. The aliens were an enigma, a puzzle that defied comprehension. And yet, despite the uncertainty, Riven felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in a long time: purpose. With a nod to Quarren, Riven made his exit, the corridor swallowing him in its shadowy embrace. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since taking on this absurd job, he felt like he might just be able to make a difference, even if it was just by making sure they all got out of this alive. Back in his quarters, Riven flopped onto his bunk, exhaustion pulling at him like the gravity of a dying star. He closed his eyes, letting the hum of the colony's life support systems lull him into a fitful sleep. Tomorrow, he knew, would bring more questions, more uncertainty. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of respite, floating in the void of his own thoughts. Maybe being a diplomat isn't so bad after all, he murmured to himself, the words a slurred echo in the quiet of his room. As long as I don't have to wear a suit. And with that final thought, Riven Cole drifted into a restless sleep, the weight of the universe pressing down on him even in his dreams. Riven Cole woke to the sound of the colony's alarm shrieking like a cat caught in a gravity well. It was the kind of noise that made you want to leap out of bed, except Riven's brain needed a few moments to catch up with his body. He groaned, rolling over to slap the alarms panel, but it was no use. The sound wasn't coming from his quarters but from all around him. Great, he muttered, dragging himself out of bed. Nothing like a panic alarm to start the day. He stumbled to the door, pulled on a jumpsuit that smelled suspiciously like it had been fished out of a recycling bin, and headed toward the control room. The corridors were buzzing with anxious chatter, the kind that suggested someone had royally messed up. What now? Riven grumbled as he pushed through a throng of miners clustered around the main notice board. Their faces were a mix of confusion and irritation, like they'd just been told the coffee machine was out of order indefinitely. Cole! Faye Iron's voice cut through the din like a blade, commanding and impossible to ignore. Riven turned to see her shouldering her way toward him, her expression carved from granite. "Morning, sunshine," he said with a tired grin, trying unsuccessfully to rub the sleep from his eyes. "Spare me the pleasantries," Faye shot back. "We've got a situation." "Isn't that our status quo?" Riven quipped, but Faye's expression suggested now was not the time for jokes. She gestured for him to follow, leading him to a viewport overlooking the mining fields. Riven's heart sank at the sight before him, a swirling void where there should have been empty space, a black hole that seemed to laugh in the face of physics. "That's new," Riven said, doing his best to mask his unease with sarcasm. "And here I was thinking today was going to be boring." "Spare me," Faye snapped, her eyes never leaving the view. "It's playing havoc with our operations, pulling equipment out of alignment, screwing with gravitational fields." "Well," Riven said, crossing his arms, At least we don't have to worry about cleaning up any more floating space debris. Faye shot him a glare that suggested she was considering throwing him out the airlock to see if the black hole was hungry. This isn't a joke, Cole. It's affecting the life support systems too. Riven's humor dried up like a water droplet on a sun-baked asteroid. Life support systems, how bad? Bad enough that if we don't figure out how to counteract the gravitational waves, we might be breathing vacuum in a few days. Riven nodded, his mind racing through the possibilities. And the aliens? Any chance they're playing cosmic tag with it? That's one hell of a leap, Faye replied, skepticism etched into the lines of her face. But given our luck, I wouldn't rule it out. Right, Riven said. Let's get to work then. The control room was a flurry of activity, with technicians scrambling between consoles and barking into comms like harried dogs. Riven's eyes scanned the chaos, looking for their resident alien expert. Spotting Quarren's gelatinous form amongst the crowd was like finding a nebula in a star field. Riven waved him over, drawing the alien philosopher into a corner where they could talk without shouting over the din. Quarren, you know anything about spontaneous black holes showing up to ruin our day? Quarren's appendages quivered thoughtfully. Such phenomena are rare but not unheard of, he replied, the telepathic words echoing soothingly in Riven's mind. The timing is peculiar. You think, Riven said dryly. Does it smell like an alien prank to you? Quarren's response was a series of undulating gestures, akin to a human shrug. It is possible but unlikely. We value observation over interference. Well, someone's interfering, Riven snapped, frustration edging his voice. We need to know if this is natural or someone's idea of a cosmic joke. I will consult with my kin, Quarren said, the words carrying a weight that promised action. We will communicate with the nearby systems, gather more information. Good. And while you're at it, see if you can figure out how to stop this thing from turning us into spaghetti. Quarren's appendages fluttered, a gesture Riven had come to associate with a solemn promise. We will endeavor to assist. As Quarren glided away, Riven turned back to Faye, who was coordinating with the miners. Her presence was a rock amidst the storm, steady and unyielding. So what's the game plan, boss? Riven asked, falling into step beside her. We strengthen the life support systems for one, Faye said, ticking off points on her fingers. I'm not gonna let a black hole make a joke of my air supply. We've got engineers on it already, rerouting power, stabilizing the generators. Sounds like a party, Riven remarked. I'll bring the chips. Faye's lips twitched, almost forming a smile. Yeah, and I'll bring the dip. The work was grueling, a race against the ever-increasing gravitational pull that threatened to tear the colony apart. Riven found himself elbow-deep in cables, assisting wherever he could, even if his technical expertise was limited to making coffee machines submit to his will. As the Iors dragged on, the colony's atmosphere grew tense, a palpable weight pressing down on everyone's shoulders. Riven could feel the toll it was taking, the ever-present threat gnawing at the edges of their sanity. Cole, Faye called, breaking his focus from the tangled mess of wires in front of him. We've got a comm from the aliens. Riven wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, the fabric now as stained as his conscience. What's the verdict? Are we on their list of cosmic clowns? Faye handed him a slim data tablet, the screen pulsing with an incoming message. Riven's heart skipped a beat as he read the details. Well, he said, looking up to meet Faye's gaze. That's interesting. Interesting how? Faye asked, crossing her arms. The aliens say they've detected unusual energy signatures around the black hole, Riven explained, the words tumbling out fast and urgent. Something's definitely not natural here. Faye's eyes narrowed. So someone is playing God with gravity. Looks like it, Riven agreed. And from the sound of it, they don't have a clue who either. Fantastic, Faye muttered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Just what we needed, an invisible hand toying with our lives. Welcome to space, Riven said with a wry grin. The universe is a bigger mess than any of us. All right, Faye said, her mind already working through the possibilities. We need to figure out how to counteract those energy signatures, stabilize our systems. And if we can't, Riven asked, the question hanging in the air like a bad smell. Then we prepare for evacuation, Faye replied, her voice steely. But we won't go down without a fight. The next few days were a blur of activity, the colony a hive of desperate energy. Riven worked alongside Faye and the miners, doing his best to keep morale up with a steady stream of dark humor and caffeine. "What's the worst that could happen?" he quipped during a particularly tense moment, earning more than a few glares. "We get sucked into the great cosmic drain and come out the other side in a galaxy where taxes don't exist." Despite the grim circumstances, there was a strange sense of camaraderie building amongst the colonists, a shared determination to face the unknown together. Even the miners, usually a surly lot, found themselves cracking jokes and sharing stories during breaks. "Remember that time the reactor overload almost fried us all?" one miner recounted, laughter tinged with a hint of hysteria. "Now that was a day." "Yeah, and this is just like that," another replied, except with more existential dread. As the days wore on, Riven found himself reflecting on the situation with a strange mix of dread and resolve. The black hole was a reminder of their fragility, the thin line between survival and oblivion. Yet, amidst the chaos, there was a growing sense of purpose, an understanding that they were all in this together, for better or worse. Quarren's updates continued to trickle in, each one a small piece of the larger puzzle. The aliens were doing their best to assist, their insights invaluable in deciphering the energy signatures. But progress was slow, the solutions elusive. "Any luck?" Riven asked one afternoon, finding Quarren in the control room, his appendages working over a holo display with meticulous precision. "We have made some progress," Quarren replied, his telepathic voice a bomb amidst the storm. "But it is a challenge beyond our current understanding." "Welcome to our world," Riven said with a tired smile. "Everything's a challenge here." "We will not cease our efforts," Quarren assured him. "Together we shall find a way." "Yeah," Riven agreed, feeling a spark of hope amidst the gloom. Together, the final hours were a blur, a mad scramble to implement last-ditch solutions and pray they held. Riven found himself at the heart of the action, coordinating with Faye and the engineers, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "All right, everyone," Faye said, her voice cutting through the noise like a beacon. "This is it. We've got one shot to stabilize the systems and keep us out of that black hole's maw." "No pressure," Riven added, earning a mix of nervous laughter and groans. With a final nod, Faye gave the order and the room plunged into action. Consoles beeped, warnings flashed, the hum of machinery a constant backdrop. Riven's heart pounded in his chest, the seconds stretching into infinity as they waited for the outcome. Then slowly the alarms began to fade, the cacophony of system warnings diminishing to a low murmur. Riven let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, relief flooding through him like water through a cracked dam. "We did it," Faye said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and triumph. "For now," Riven replied, the cynicism never quite leaving his tone. "Let's not tempt fate more than we have to." As the colony settled into an uneasy calm, Riven found himself standing at the viewport, gazing out at the black hole that had come so close to swallowing them whole. It was a reminder of the universe's indifference, the precariousness of their existence. But as he stood there, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in their resilience, their determination to face the unknown with courage and wit. They'd survived this challenge, and whatever came next, they would face it together. "Maybe being a diplomat isn't so bad after all," Riven murmured, echoing his earlier sentiment. "Even if it does involve occasional bouts of cosmic insanity." And with that thought, he turned away from the viewport, ready to face whatever the universe decided to throw at them next. Riven Cole stood in the control room, surrounded by flickering screens that seemed to reflect his own flickering hopes. The colony's alarm had finally taken a break from its perpetual scream, replaced by a tense hum of machinery that filled the air like the soundtrack to a thriller. The immediate threat of the black hole had been pushed back, but everyone knew it was like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. And now there was a new threat: sabotage. "Accidents, my ass," Riven muttered, running a hand through his hair. It hadn't seen a comb or a wash in days, and was starting to resemble the surface of the asteroid, rough and unyielding. Faye Irons was pacing like a caged animal, her usual calm demeanor frayed around the edges. "We've had 3 incidents in the last 12 hours," she was saying, her voice taut as a stretched cable. "A power surge in the main reactor, a coolant leak in life support, and now this." This was the sudden failure of the colony's main comm system, which had gone dark at the exact moment they were expecting a crucial update from Quarren's alien kin. It was almost as if the universe had developed a sense of humor, one that involved poking them with a sharp stick whenever they started to feel vaguely optimistic. "Maybe the comms just decided to take a day off," Riven suggested, leaning back in his chair. "I hear circuits need a vacation every now and then." Faye shot him a glare that could have melted steel. "Not helping, Cole." "Hey, just trying to lighten the mood," Riven said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Anyway, you can't deny it's suspicious." "Someone's screwing with us." "Who would do that?" Faye snapped, frustration bubbling over. "We're all in this mess together." "Maybe someone's idea of a cosmic joke," Riven said, echoing his earlier sentiment. "Or maybe someone's just tired of the same old asteroid life and wants to spice things up." Before Faye could respond, the door slid open and Quarren oozed into the room, his translucent form shimmering in the dim light. "The philosophers have reached a consensus," Quarren announced, his telepathic voice cutting through the tension like a knife through butter. "We believe there is an external force at play, one that may be manipulating events for its own purposes." "Great," Faye said, her voice heavy with sarcasm. "So we're not just dealing with a black hole, but a puppet master, too." Quarren's appendages undulated thoughtfully. "The universe is vast and full of mysteries. It would be unwise to rule out any possibilities." "Yeah, well, right now I'd settle for some good old-fashioned certainty," Riven grumbled. "Like knowing if our comms are toast or if someone's playing with the wires." "We're investigating," Faye said, her tone softening. "But with everything going on, it's difficult." Quarren shifted his attention to Riven. "The philosophers are also intrigued by human resilience. Despite these challenges, you persist. It is remarkable." "Remarkable or just plain stupid?" Riven asked with a wry smile. "Sometimes I think the human race is just too stubborn to know when to quit." "Perhaps that is your greatest strength," Quarren mused. "Or your greatest weakness. Depends on the day," Riven replied, glancing over to where Faye was conferring with a cluster of engineers, their faces drawn and serious. "Today, I'd say it's a toss-up." As the Iors dragged by, the atmosphere in the colony grew thicker with suspicion. Everyone had a theory and everyone was a suspect. The miners grumbled amongst themselves, casting sideways glances at their colleagues, as if expecting one of them to suddenly sprout a villain's mustache and start twirling it ominously. Riven found himself in the bar, the dingy watering hole providing a brief respite from the chaos. The bartender, a grizzled veteran with more scars than a battlefield, slid a glass of something that vaguely resembled alcohol across the counter. "Can't say I envy you, Cole," the bartender said, his voice rough as gravel. "Stuck between a black hole and a saboteur. Hell of a way to spend a week." "Yeah, I should have taken up knitting," Riven replied, taking a sip. The liquid burned its way down his throat and he couldn't decide if it was a blessing or a curse. "Less dangerous, more therapeutic." "Therapeutic ain't exactly your style," the bartender pointed out. "You're more of a punch the problem till it goes away kind of guy." Riven chuckled, though it felt more like a cough. "Guess I need to find something to punch then." The bartender nodded sagely. "Punching's good, or you could find out who's behind this mess and punch them." "Yeah, working on that," Riven said. "But it's hard to punch an invisible saboteur, you know." "True," the bartender conceded. "But you find them, you give them one for me too." Riven drained his glass, set it down with a thunk. Deal. Back in the control room, chaos reigned. Faye was on the verge of tearing her hair out. Engineers were arguing over schematics, and the air was thick with the kind of tension that made your teeth itch. "Riven," Faye called, waving him over. "We've got another problem." "Of course we do," Riven sighed, joining her at a console. "What is it this time? Did the toilets revolt?" "Worse," Faye said, pointing at the screen. "We've got a breach in the hull." Riven stared at the blinking red dot, his brain struggling to catch up. "A breach? That's not possible. The hull's reinforced like a bloody tank." "Possible or not, it's happening," Faye said tersely. "And we need to fix it before we all start sucking vacuum." "Right," Riven said, his mind racing. "Any idea what caused it?" Faye shook her head, frustration etched into every line of her face. "No clue, and we've got no comms to contact Quarren for help. Looks like we're on our own," Riven muttered. No pressure. As the engineers scrambled to repair the breach, Riven couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something, some vital clue that would explain the chaos and sabotage. The colony's communications were still down, and with each hour that passed, the black hole's influence seemed to loom larger, like a cosmic judge deliberating their fate. Quarren glided over, his presence a calming balm amidst the storm of human emotion. "We are continuing our investigations into the philosophical implications of these events," he said, his telepathic message tinged with curiosity. "The existence of a soul, as you would term it, remains an intriguing subject." "Glad to hear philosophy's still alive and kicking," Riven replied, his tone dry. "Any insights you want to share with the class?" Quarren's appendages quivered in what Riven had come to interpret as amusement. "Human resilience suggests something more than mere biology. It is as though you are driven by an unseen force, a will that defies logic." "Yeah, we call that stubbornness," Riven said with a smirk. "Or a death wish, depending on who you ask." "Fascinating," Quarren mused. "Perhaps that is the essence of your soul, a refusal to yield." "Could be," Riven conceded. "Or maybe we're just too dumb to know when to give up." As the day's work stretched into night, the colony's inhabitants grew wearier, their faces drawn and eyes shadowed. Suspicion gnawed at them like a rat with a bone, and tempers flared over the smallest of provocations. Riven caught snatches of conversations, arguments about who was responsible, accusations thrown like grenades in the dark. "Maybe it's the new miners," one voice suggested, dripping with distrust. "Never liked the look of him." "Could be anyone," another countered. "Hell, for all we know, it could be one of us." Riven felt his own paranoia creeping in, a sly whisper at the back of his mind. The colony had always been a place of camaraderie, forged in the harsh conditions of space. But now, it felt like a tinderbox, ready to ignite with the slightest spark. He found himself back at the viewport, staring out at the black hole that had become both their enemy and their constant companion. Its swirling darkness seemed to mock their efforts, an ever-present reminder of the universe's indifference. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said, breaking his reverie. It was Faye, her expression softer now, the anger of earlier replaced by something like resignation. "Yeah," Riven replied, his tone bitter. "If you're into existential dread." Faye chuckled softly. "Not my usual scene, but I can see the appeal. Makes you feel small, doesn't it?" "Small, insignificant, and screwed," Riven agreed. "But hey, at least we're consistent." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the colony's troubles pressing down on them like the gravity of 1,000 worlds. "We'll figure this out," Faye said finally, her voice carrying a thread of determination. "We have to." "Yeah," Riven said, though he wasn't sure if he believed it. "We always do." As the night wore on, the engineers managed to patch the hull breach, their weary faces lit by the glow of welding torches. The colony settled into an uneasy calm, tension simmering beneath the surface like a volcano waiting to erupt. Riven found himself back in the bar, seeking solace in the familiar embrace of his drink. The bartender gave him a nod, sliding over a fresh glass. "Here's to surviving another day," the bartender said, raising his own glass in a toast. "To surviving," Riven echoed, clinking his glass against the bartender's. and to finding out who's been screwing with us before they get us all killed. Amen to that, the bartender said gruffly. As Riven sat nursing his drink, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the cusp of something bigger, a revelation that would either save them or doom them. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying, like standing on the edge of a precipice and peering into the abyss. The colony was still on high alert, every shadow harboring a potential threat, every creak of the metal a reminder of their precarious existence. Yet amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was a flicker of hope, a stubborn refusal to surrender, a belief that they could weather this storm and emerge stronger on the other side. As the night wore on, Riven found himself reflecting on the nature of resilience, the human capacity to endure in the face of overwhelming odds. Perhaps it was a soul, as Quarren suggested, or perhaps it was just the innate human desire to survive, to keep pushing forward even when the darkness closed in. Whatever it was, Riven knew they would need every ounce of it in the days to come. The universe was a harsh mistress, but they were nothing if not tenacious. And so, as the hours ticked by and the black hole loomed ever larger, Riven Cole steeled himself for the challenges ahead, ready to face whatever the universe threw their way with grit, determination, and just a hint of gallows humor. After all, if they couldn't laugh in the face of death, what was the point? With a final swig of his drink, Riven rose from his seat, ready to rejoin the fray. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, miners, aliens, philosophers, and all. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes in the cold, indifferent expanse of space, something was all you needed. Riven Cole didn't see himself as a philosopher, more of a hit-it-till-it-works kind of guy, and sometimes that worked. Until now, when everything seemed to be spiraling faster than a particularly vindictive drain. Even the damn asteroid seemed to be conspiring against them, each rumble and shake a not-so-gentle reminder that their time might be running out. The control room was a tornado of chaos. Screens flickered with annoyance, engineers babbled in an incomprehensible technobabble symphony, and Faye Irons was pacing with a look that said she was about 3 heartbeats away from eating someone alive. "Cole, where the hell have you been?" she snapped, her voice frayed at the edges like an old cable. Riven shrugged, rolling his shoulders as if to shrug off the weight of the universe. "Thought I'd go sightseeing. Check if the black hole developed any new features." "Funny," she said without smiling. "We've got a situation." "Well, color me surprised," Riven replied, sliding into a chair that protested under his weight. "What's the latest calamity?" "The black hole's acting up," Faye said, running a hand through her hair with the kind of frustration that promised a good venting session was overdue. "It's getting unstable, and we're running out of options." "Unstable as in it's going to eat us unstable, or it's going to ruin our day unstable?" Riven asked, half hoping for the latter. He wasn't feeling particularly appetizing. "Somewhere in between," she replied, her eyes darting to the screen where a red graph was doing the cha-cha. "The philosophers have a theory," Riven sighed. "Of course they do. Probably something about the cosmic significance of our impending doom." "Pretty much," Faye said. "They want to run an experiment, something about testing the essence of our soul under duress." "Great. Because what we really need right now is an existential crisis layered over a gravitational one," Riven muttered, rubbing his temples. "What does this experiment involve? Sacrificing a goat to the space gods?" "No goats, just our own sanity," Faye replied with a grim smile. "They want to see how we react to increased stress." Apparently the black hole is the perfect lab rat. Riven let out a laugh that sounded more like a bark. "Fantastic. Just when I thought this place couldn't get any more like a madhouse." Before Faye could respond, the control room's lights flickered ominously, like the universe was deciding whether to keep them around or not. Riven glanced at the screens, hoping for a miracle and getting a middle finger instead. "We're losing power," an engineer shouted over the din, his voice tinged with panic. "Of course we are," Riven said, the sarcasm flowing as naturally as air. "Wouldn't be a proper crisis without it." Faye was already barking orders, trying to maintain some semblance of order amidst the chaos. Get the backup systems online. We need to stabilize the power or we're all going to be space debris. Riven knew what that meant. They were running out of time, and their options were shrinking faster than a politician's promise. The black hole was growing more unstable by the minute, and with the colony's resources dwindling, they were on a one-way ticket to oblivion. In the bar, the atmosphere was as thick as the sludge they dared to call beer. The bartender, ever the stoic, was cleaning glasses with the kind of dedication that might imply he was expecting a health inspection. Riven slumped onto a stool, gesturing for a drink. "Surprise me, preferably with something that won't kill me." The bartender obliged, sliding a drink over with the practiced ease of someone who'd seen more than his fair share of end-of-the-world scenarios. "Heard things are getting interesting up there." "Interesting's one word for it," Riven grumbled, taking a sip and grimacing at the taste. "Might be the last drink we get if things don't improve. Never thought I'd see the day a black hole would be the least of our worries," the bartender said, leaning on the counter. "But here we are." Riven snorted. "Yeah, we've got existential philosophy on one side and cosmic destruction on the other. Hell of a way to go." "Could be worse," the bartender mused. "Could be stuck on Earth." "True," Riven conceded. "At least here, when we screw up, it's spectacular." The door swung open, admitting Quarren with the smooth glide of someone who was either supremely confident or blissfully unaware of their surroundings. Riven figured it was a bit of both. "Riven Cole," Quarren's telepathic voice echoed in his mind. "I understand there is concern regarding the current state of the black hole." "Concern's one way to put it," Riven replied, offering a wry smile. "You got any brilliant alien insights up your sleeve?" Quarren's appendages twitched in what Riven interpreted as polite confusion. "Our investigations continue. The nature of your resilience is being tested, and we are eager to observe the outcomes." Riven rolled his eyes. "Glad to hear we're still your favorite lab mice. Your ferocity in the face of adversity remains unparalleled," Quarren said, a note of admiration in his mental tone. "It is most inspiring." "Inspiring's one word for it," Riven said, draining his glass. "If we survive, maybe we'll put that on a t-shirt." The black hole loomed large in the viewport, its swirling darkness a constant reminder of their precarious position. Riven found himself drawn to it, morbid curiosity mingling with a heavy dose of dread. It was like staring into the abyss and seeing it winking back at you, a cosmic taunt with no punchline. "Riven," Faye's voice crackled over the comms, "we need you back in the control room, now." "On my way," Riven said, tossing a few credits onto the counter and nodding to the bartender. "Keep the good stuff ready. I might need it." Back in the control room, the tension had ratcheted up to a fever pitch. The lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows across the panicked faces of the crew. Faye was at the console, her expression a mix of determination and exhaustion. "We've got a plan," she said as Riven approached. "If you can call it that." "Do I even want to know?" Riven asked, eyeing the screens with suspicion. "The philosophers think they can stabilize the black hole using a burst of concentrated energy," Faye said, her voice carrying the weight of desperation. "It's risky as hell, but it's all we've got." "And if it fails?" Riven asked, already knowing the answer. "Then we're screwed," Faye admitted. "But it's better than waiting for the end." Riven pondered that for a moment. It was a classic case of choosing between a rock and a hard place, only in this case the rock was a black hole and the hard place was oblivion. "Well, I always did love a good gamble," he said with a crooked grin. "Let's do it." The control room buzzed with frantic energy as the crew scrambled to execute the plan. Riven watched the activity with a mix of awe and apprehension, aware that this might be their last stand. "Initiating energy burst," Faye announced, her fingers flying over the console with practiced precision. "Brace for impact." Riven held his breath, the silence stretching out like an elastic band ready to snap. Then, with a shudder that shook the very bones of the colony, the energy burst was unleashed, a blinding surge of light and power that shot towards the black hole like a missile. The seconds ticked by with excruciating slowness, every heartbeat a countdown to either salvation or destruction. Riven's eyes were glued to the viewport, watching as the energy collided with the black hole, a dazzling display that lit up the darkness in a moment of brilliance. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. Riven could almost feel the universe holding its breath, waiting for the outcome. Then slowly, the swirling chaos began to calm, the black hole stabilizing under the onslaught of energy. "We did it," Faye breathed, her voice thick with relief. "We actually did it." Riven let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, a grin spreading across his face. "Well, I'll be damned. We might just make it out of this alive." The control room erupted into cheers, the tension dissolving in a wave of jubilation. For a moment, they were no longer a crew on the brink of annihilation, but a band of survivors who had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious. As the celebrations continued, Riven found himself standing at the viewport, staring out at the now stable black hole with a mix of awe and respect. It was still a formidable presence, a constant reminder of the fragility of their existence, but for now, it was no longer an immediate threat. "Guess we showed the universe what we're made of," Riven said, his words carrying a note of defiance. "Stubbornness and all." Quarren joined him, his presence a comforting balm amidst the chaos. "Your resilience is remarkable, Riven Cole," he said, his mental tone warm with approval. "It seems you have proven the essence of your soul beyond doubt." "Guess so," Riven replied, his grin widening. "Not bad for a bunch of stubborn humans, huh?" As the crew celebrated their hard-won victory, Riven allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had faced the darkness and come out stronger for it, their resilience and determination shining through even the darkest of times. And as the universe continued its relentless march, Riven knew they would be ready for whatever came next. After all, they were human, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was defying the odds. Riven Cole sat at the bar, nursing a drink that tasted like it had been filtered through engine grease. He wrinkled his nose, wondering for the 100th time why he kept subjecting himself to the bartender's special. Maybe it was a masochistic streak, or maybe he just enjoyed complaining. Either way, it was a distraction from the apocalypse-level mess they were in. "How's the end of the universe treating you?" the bartender asked, wiping down the counter with a rag that looked like it had seen better days in a different millennium. "About as well as this drink," Riven grumbled. "Might just be the same thing, really." The bartender chuckled, a sound like gravel in a blender. "At least it keeps things interesting." "Interesting is an understatement," Riven replied, glancing at Quarren, who was perched on a stool beside him. The alien's appendages twitched in a way that was either a sign of amusement or mild annoyance. Riven had yet to figure out which. "Riven Cole," Quarren's voice echoed in his head, smooth and calm, as if discussing the weather. "The experiment on human resilience continues. Your species remains a subject of great interest." "Glad to know we're entertaining," Riven shot back, setting his glass down with a clatter. "But right now I need a favor." Quarren's appendages ceased their twitching, a sure sign of interest. "A favor?" "Yeah," Riven said. "We need you to hold off on your little experiment, just for a bit. Faye's got a plan, and it involves using our mining equipment to stabilize the black hole." The bartender snorted. "Mining equipment to fix a black hole, that's a new one." "Desperate times," Riven muttered. Quarren considered this, his gaze fixed on Riven like a scientist pondering a particularly intriguing lab rat. "Our protocols do not typically allow for delays." Riven leaned in, his voice low and intense. "Quarren, we've got one shot at this. If it works, it'll be one hell of a story to tell your alien buddies. You'll be the envoy who witnessed the day humans turned a mining rig into a universe-saving device." Quarren tilted his head, considering. "Very well," he finally agreed. "I shall delay the experiment, but not indefinitely." "That's all I ask," Riven said, letting out a breath of relief. "Appreciate it. Do not disappoint," Quarren added, his telepathic voice carrying an unmistakable edge. "No pressure, huh?" Riven mumbled as he stood up, feeling the weight of their predicament settle back onto his shoulders. As Riven made his way back to the control room, he couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of their situation. Here they were, a ragtag group of miners and engineers, standing between a black hole and the destruction of their colony, with nothing but some rusty equipment and sheer stubbornness. Inside the control room, Faye was orchestrating the chaos like a maestro overseeing a particularly unruly orchestra. Her voice cut through the din, directing the crew with a confidence that was only slightly less shaky than their circumstances. "Riven," Faye called, spotting him through the crowd. "Did you talk to Quarren?" "Yeah," Riven replied. "He's giving us some time." "Good," Faye said, her eyes gleaming with a determined fire. "Let's get to work then." The plan was simple, so simple it was almost laughable. They'd use the colony's mining lasers to shoot a concentrated burst of energy at the black hole, much like pointing a penlight at the sun and hoping for a tan. But simple plans had a way of working when all else failed. At least that was the hope. "Everyone knows their part?" Faye asked, looking around the room at the assembled crew. There were nods and murmurs of assent, faces set with grim determination. In the background, the hum of machinery provided a steady rhythm, a heartbeat to match their own. "Great," Faye said. "Then let's show this universe what we're made of. Riven, you'll be on the lasers. Just point and shoot." "Point and shoot," Riven echoed, nerves jangling like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Easy enough." As he took his position at the laser controls, Riven couldn't help a wry smile. Humanity had always been good at making do with what they had, even if what they had was more suited for blasting rocks than saving worlds. The countdown began, each second ticking away with the relentless inevitability of a cosmic joke. Riven's hands hovered over the controls, sweat slicking his palms. He glanced over at Faye, who gave him a nod of encouragement. "Here goes nothing," he murmured, activating the lasers with a flick of his fingers. The beams shot out, piercing the void with a light that seemed impossibly bright against the backdrop of space. It was a shot in the dark, quite literally, and as the seconds stretched into eternity, Riven felt his heart thundering in time with the pulse of the machines. "Come on," he whispered, eyes locked on the viewport. The energy hit the black hole, a tiny pinprick of light against the vastness. It seemed absurdly small, a David and Goliath scenario played out on a cosmic scale. For a moment, nothing happened and Riven's heart sank, the weight of failure pressing down on him. Then, ever so slowly, the black hole began to change. Its swirling darkness shifted, stabilizing under the onslaught, the chaos subsiding into something resembling calm. "We did it," someone breathed, the words a collective exhalation of disbelief and triumph. Faye's voice cut through the shocked silence, filled with a mixture of pride and relief. "We actually did it." Riven let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, leaning back in his chair, his body suddenly feeling boneless with relief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had turned the tide. Quarren approached, his mental voice carrying a note of admiration. "A most remarkable feat, Riven Cole. Your species never ceases to amaze." "Yeah, well," Riven said with a tired grin, "sometimes it pays to be stubborn." The control room erupted into cheers and laughter, the tension of the past Iors dissolving in a wave of jubilation. Riven felt a hand clap on his shoulder and turned to see Faye, her face flushed with excitement. "Nice shooting, Cole," she said, her smile wide and genuine. "I knew you had it in you. Just had to point and shoot," he replied, unable to keep the grin off his face. "Simple, right?" Faye laughed, a sound that was like music in the midst of chaos. "Simple as it gets." As the celebrations continued, Riven found himself drawn back to the viewport, staring out at the black hole that had once been their doom. It was still there, a reminder of just how close they had come to the brink, but now it was a testament to their resilience, a symbol of the stubborn tenacity that defined them. "You humans are indeed formidable," Quarren said, joining him at the viewport. "This experience will be most enlightening for our studies." "Glad we could help," Riven replied with a chuckle. "And I mean that." Thanks for giving us a shot. Quarren inclined his head, his appendages twitching in what Riven interpreted as a bow. The honor is yours, Riven Cole. As the crew reveled in their hard-won victory, Riven allowed himself a moment to savor the feeling of triumph. They had faced the darkness and emerged not only intact but stronger for it. In the end, it was their adaptability, their ability to make the impossible possible, that had saved them. And so, as the universe continued its relentless march, Riven Cole knew that whatever came next, they would meet it head-on. For they were human, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was defying the odds. Riven Cole was beginning to think he'd developed a masochistic fondness for chaos. Or maybe it was just his knack for finding himself right in the thick of it, standing knee-deep in the universe's latest cosmic joke. He adjusted his jumpsuit, still reeking of something that had been through a few too many recycling bins, and surveyed the control room. It was a mess of flickering screens, engineers yelling in technobabble, and the constant, comforting hum of machines that somehow still held everything together. "All right, folks, let's not screw this up," Faye Irons called, her voice slicing through the clamor like a rusty knife through old cheese. She stood at the forefront, her presence a tempest of nerves and steely determination. "Riven, you remember how to play with lasers, right?" "Point and shoot," Riven replied, flashing a grin that was more grimace than anything else. "Can't be much harder than a bar brawl. Just aim for the universe's jugular," Faye quipped, although her eyes betrayed a glint of worry. She turned back to the console, fingers flying over the controls like a pianist trying to keep up with an off-tempo symphony. Riven settled into his seat, the well-loved chair creaking beneath him. It was one of those situations where you either laughed or cried, and he'd always preferred the former, even if it was more of a bitter chuckle half the time. "Let's kick this black hole's arse," Riven muttered to himself, hands hovering over the laser controls. It was like getting ready to punch a galaxy in the mouth, a task both absurd and suicidal. Quarren moved to his side, appendages twitching with what Riven hoped was confidence. "Your resilience is commendable, Riven Cole. Why not share a few more human insights for our records? Like how we're all a bunch of loonies trying to stab a black hole with a glorified flashlight." Riven shot back, eyes on the viewport. Quarren's appendages twitched, which Riven took as alien laughter. Precisely. The countdown began, numbers flashing across the screens like an unforgiving metronome. Each tick was a reminder of how close they were to either success or becoming cosmic dust. "5," Faye announced, her voice unwavering despite the madness of their plan. "4, 3, Riven echoed, feeling his pulse sync with the numbers. 2, 1. With a flick of his fingers, Riven activated the lasers. They shot out into space, beams of energy slicing through the void like the universe's worst idea for a disco show. It was a sight to behold, a tiny flare of human defiance against the immensity of nothingness. For a moment, nothing happened. The black hole remained an ominous maw in the backdrop, as indifferent as a bureaucrat on their 15th coffee break. Riven held his breath, a sinking feeling gnawing at the pit of his stomach. "Come on, you big bastard," Riven urged the black hole, as if sheer willpower might bend the laws of physics in their favor. Then slowly, the black hole began to respond. The swirling chaos changed, the swirling maw stabilizing like a drunken giant finally finding its footing. The energy from the lasers was doing something, the impossible shift playing out in real time. "We did it," someone breathed, disbelief mingling with elation. Faye punched the air, her grin a mix of triumph and sheer relief. "We did it," she echoed, and the control room erupted into chaos far different from the panic that had reigned before. This was chaos born of victory, tinged with relief and doses of incredulous laughter. Riven let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, slumping back in his chair with the kind of exhaustion that felt like it deserved a medal. "I can't believe that worked," he said, voice tinged with awe and no small amount of disbelief. "Your species continues to surprise," Quarren said, the alien's mental voice carrying a note of genuine admiration. "This will be of great interest to our studies." "Happy to oblige," Riven said. "Anything to keep the universe from turning us into cosmic mulch." Celebrations ensued, a spontaneous eruption of high fives, hugs, and the kind of camaraderie that only came from staring into the abyss and managing to flip it the bird. Riven found himself swept into the revelry, slapped on the back by miners and engineers who looked at him as if he'd personally piloted them out of certain doom. "Nice shooting," Faye said, her voice cutting through the din as she sidled up beside him. Her eyes sparkled with something bright and dangerous, hope. "You really saved our arses there, Cole." "Couldn't have done it without a crazy plan from a mad engineer," Riven replied, a grin pulling at his lips. "Simple, right?" "Simple," Faye echoed, her laughter a sound of pure exhilaration. "Sometimes crazy is the only way forward." As the control room buzzed with energy, Riven found himself by the viewport again, staring out at the black hole that had nearly been their end. Now, it was a testament to their tenacity, a reminder that sometimes survival was as much about guts as it was about logic. "You humans are indeed formidable," Quarren said, joining him. "This experience will enrich our understanding of resilience." "Glad we could contribute to the science of stubbornness," Riven replied with a chuckle. "And thanks for giving us a chance." Quarren inclined his head, appendages twitching in a gesture Riven had come to recognize as respect. "The honor is yours, Riven Cole." As the crew reveled in their hard-won victory, Riven allowed himself a moment to savor it. They had faced the darkness and emerged not only intact but stronger for it. In the end, it was their adaptability, their ability to make the impossible possible, that had saved them. The universe, for all its vast indifference, had been challenged by a bunch of humans with nothing but grit and outdated machinery. And they'd won, at least for now. That was the beauty of humanity, if you could call it that, its infuriating, relentless ability to muddle through. "So," Riven said, turning to Quarren with a grin, "what's next on the agenda? Another reality-bending experiment, perhaps?" Quarren's appendages twitched, a mental laughter echoing across their connection. "Perhaps. But for now, we shall observe and learn." "Observe and learn," Riven mused, raising his drink in a mock toast. "Welcome to humanity, friend." As the celebrations continued around him, Riven allowed himself a moment of contemplation, the noise of the control room fading into the background. They'd done the impossible, turned a mining rig into a tool for salvation, and proved that sometimes the best way to face the universe was with a grin and a well-aimed punch. And so, as the universe continued its relentless march, Riven Cole knew that whatever came next, they would meet it head-on. For they were human, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was defying the odds. Riven Cole watched as the aftermath of their madcap victory spread through the colony like a particularly infectious rash. The control room was awash with relieved laughter, alcohol flowing like it was the last party before the universe called it quits. The miners and engineers were breaking out the good stuff, or at least, the stuff that wasn't made entirely of recycled waste. Riven leaned back, nursing a drink that tasted more like fermented shoe polish than anything meant for human consumption. "To the most reckless idiots in the universe," he toasted, raising his glass. "A toast we can all get behind." Faye Irons laughed, clinking her glass against his. Her hair was a wild mess, and the circles under her eyes were dark enough to have their own gravitational pull, but she looked alive, electric. Quarren hovered near them, appendages twitching in what Riven now knew was the alien's version of a Cheshire grin. "Your species' capacity for survival is unparalleled," Quarren observed, his mental voice carrying the air of a scientist who'd just discovered a particularly fascinating new strain of mold. "Unparalleled stupidity, maybe," Riven shot back, taking a long swig. "But hey, if it works right." "It does make for compelling study," Quarren agreed, his head bobbing in what might have been a nod. "Our philosophers have taken a keen interest in this notion of human resilience." Good, Riven said, eyeing the celebration with a kind of paternal pride. Always nice to be the subject of cosmic tea parties. The alien inclined his head. Our philosophers believe that such resilience speaks of a unique spiritual essence, something that transcends mere survival instinct. Faye snorted. That's one way to spin too stubborn to die. Quarren's appendages twitched again, the alien equivalent of a chuckle. Indeed, your defiance has been noted as a trait worth understanding, a potent force. Riven shrugged, trying to play it cool despite the uncomfortable feeling of being dissected like a particularly troublesome lab rat. We just call it Tuesday. As the celebrations rolled on, the colony's loudspeakers crackled to life, the voice of the bartender, an ever-present commentator on the absurdity of existence, booming over the din. "Ladies and gents, your attention please," he drawled, sounding like a cat that had learned to talk and wasn't entirely sure it was worth the effort. "We have among us those who punched a black hole in the face. Let's give it up for the glorious bastards who kept us from becoming cosmic jam." The room erupted into applause, a wave of cheers that rolled over Riven like a warm tide. He raised his drink once more, the liquid sloshing perilously close to the rim. "To cosmic jam, to cosmic avoidance," Faye echoed, grinning widely. Quarren's head tilted, a gesture Riven had come to associate with curiosity. "What is jam?" Riven blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "It's mashed fruit, but stickier and sweeter. Not exactly applicable here, but you get the metaphor." Quarren nodded, though Riven suspected the alien was filing away more than he let on. "A fascinating concept. Our experiments will benefit greatly from these insights. Just remember, when in doubt, act like you own the place," Riven said with a smirk. "Even if the place is trying to kill you." As the night wore on, any tensions that remained were washed away in a flood of cheap booze and shared camaraderie. The asteroid colony, for all its faults and fragility, was alive with hope, a rare commodity in a universe usually intent on proving just how vast and uncaring it could be. Faye leaned against the viewport, watching the now stable black hole with something like satisfaction. "You know," she said, her voice contemplative, "there's something poetic about it. We took the universe's scariest monster and made it our pet project." "Poetic," Riven agreed, though his idea of poetry typically involved less staring into the void and more avoiding it altogether. "We really should stop making a habit of this, though," she laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Where's the fun in that?" Riven couldn't help but laugh too, shaking his head at the sheer madness of it all. "You know, when I signed up for this gig, I figured it'd be a lot of rock breaking and not much else. Didn't think I'd end up playing chicken with celestial bodies." "Life's weird like that," Faye replied, her gaze distant. "One minute you're just trying to make a living, the next, you're rewriting the laws of physics. Next, they'll have us sorting out peace treaties with the black holes," Riven joked, though the notion wasn't entirely absurd given their track record. Quarren, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. "Such diplomatic endeavors may not be as far-fetched as they sound. We have much to learn from one another. Well, if anyone's going to teach aliens how to party, it's us," Riven said, extending his glass in a mock toast to the alien philosopher. Quarren's appendages twitched in response. "I look forward to the exchange." The control room had transformed into a makeshift ballroom, the grim machinery adorned with whatever passed for decoration on a mining colony. Strings of lights, salvaged from some forgotten festival, twinkled overhead, casting a warm glow over the proceedings. Riven watched as miners, engineers, and even the odd philosopher mingled, the barriers of language and culture breaking down in the universal language of celebration. The colony, once a disparate collection of individuals thrown together by circumstance, felt more like a family now, a dysfunctional, slightly deranged family, but a family nonetheless. As the night wore on, Riven found himself at the bar, the bartender polishing a glass with a rag that was probably dirtier than the glass itself. "You did good, kid," the bartender said, sliding a fresh drink his way. "Didn't think you had it in you." Neither did I, Riven admitted, taking a sip and grimacing at the familiar burn. Guess desperation's the best motivator. That it is, the bartender agreed, his gaze shifting to the crowd. You know, I've seen a lot of folks come and go from here. Most don't stick around long enough to matter, but you might just change things. Riven chuckled, shaking his head. I'm just a guy who happened to press the right button at the right time. The bartender laughed, a deep, rolling sound. And that, my friend, is the most important talent of all. Riven spent the rest of the night drifting through the crowd, exchanging stories and laughter with faces both familiar and new. The colony felt alive in a way it hadn't before, as if surviving the brink of annihilation had kindled a fire that no amount of cosmic indifference could snuff out. He found Quarren again, the alien standing at the edge of the room, observing with the air of someone who was both a part of and apart from the proceedings. So, Riven said, sidling up beside him, this what you expected when you dropped by our little corner of the galaxy? Not entirely, Quarren replied, his mental voice tinged with amusement. But it has been illuminating. Glad to hear it, Riven said, glancing around at the makeshift festivities. Not every day you get to see humans at their finest. Quarren's appendages twitched, a gesture that Riven interpreted as agreement. Your species' ability to find joy amidst chaos is remarkable. It shall be a cornerstone of our ongoing studies. You're welcome to it, Riven said with a shrug. Just as long as you remember that sometimes we're just making it up as we go along. Quarren nodded, the alien's gaze thoughtful. Such improvisation is a trait we hope to understand better. It may yet hold the key to our collaboration. Well, here's hoping, Riven said, raising his drink in yet another toast. To collaborations and whatever mad schemes come next. The alien philosopher mirrored the gesture, his appendages mimicking the motion. To the future, Riven Cole. Their makeshift party continued long into the night, the colony buzzing with the kind of infectious optimism that only came after surviving a brush with disaster. As the first hints of a new day began to creep through the viewport, Riven found himself standing beside Faye once more. Think we can do it again if we have to? She asked, her voice quiet, contemplative. Riven considered the question, weighing the odds and coming up short. I guess if we have to, we'll figure it out, he said, grinning in spite of himself. But maybe next time, let's try not staring down a black hole, yeah? Deal, Faye said, her laughter bright in the stillness. But no promises. As the colony slowly returned to something resembling normalcy, Riven knew that the future was as uncertain as ever, but for the first time he found he didn't mind. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, a ragtag group of humans and aliens bound by shared madness and a newfound respect. In the grand scheme of things, they were still just tiny specks in an uncaring universe. But they were specks with grit, resilience, and the occasional flash of brilliance. And sometimes that was enough to tip the balance in their favor. So, as the universe continued its relentless march, Riven Cole raised his glass to the unknown and welcomed whatever lay beyond with open arms. After all, if there was one thing humans were good at, it was defying the odds. And that, he mused, was a story worth telling.